I fear not the dark itself, but what may lurk within it. Welcome to Lurk, bringing you creepy, strange, and bone-chilling stories, with your host, Jamie Jackson.
Hey lurkers, welcome to this week's episode. This is a true crime episode, so I have marked it explicit because of the subject matter. I don't want anyone accidentally letting young kids listen. Also, if true crime isn't your thing, that's fine. It's okay to sit this one out. For this true crime case, we're going to look at the West Virginia University Coed murders that took place in 1970. For some reason, this case has held my interest for many years. I read a book back in the day about unsolved West Virginia murders, and this case in particular just always seemed to pique my interest. So let's get started. West Virginia University's main campus is located in Morgantown, West Virginia. The university consists of 3 smaller campuses: Downtown, Evansdale, and the Health Sciences Center. On January 18, 1970, Merritt Malarick and Karen Farrell, both freshmen at West Virginia University in Morgantown, West Virginia, decided to go see a showing of the movie of Oliver. The girls were nothing alike, though they grew into fast friends during their first semester of college. They weren't roommates, but they lived on the same floor of the Westchester Hall in the Beverly Manor complex. Their dorm was located halfway between the Downtown and Evansdale campuses. Merritt was from a privileged background. Her father was a dentist in New Jersey. She was well-liked and well-traveled. Karen was what you might call a genuine coal miner's daughter. Her family wasn't poor, but certainly weren't in the same social class as the Malaricks. Merritt was outgoing and high-strung, and Karen was known to be shy and kind. Despite their differences, or because of them, the girls were close friends. Per the university's policy at the time, freshmen weren't allowed to have cars on campus, so the girls relied on public transportation or hitchhiking. The university offered transportation between the campuses. There was a lot of concern about students hitchhiking. In fact, at the same time as this story unfolds, the university was concerned someone would get picked up by the wrong person. So back to Merritt and Karen. Earlier, on January 18th, Merritt asked Karen to join her and her boyfriend in her dorm room, but Karen declined. Karen's roommate said Karen seemed extremely nervous and uneasy about being alone. Later, the girls head out to the movie. On their way, they made a stop at the Sunnyside Superette where Merritt cashed a $10 check. They then walked 6 blocks to the movie theater. At the theater, they ended up sitting behind Paulette Burns and Clarence Lewis. The foursome left the theater around 10:45 p.m. Merritt and Karen told Clarence and Paulette that they planned to hitchhike back to campus. The girls were dancing up the street, acting out scenes from the movie, and when they reached the intersection, the group went their separate ways. Karen and Merritt presumably went to hitch a ride back to the dorm. Moments later, Paulette saw the girls drive by in a light-colored, full-size, 4-door sedan. Merritt was sitting in the middle front, and Karen was next to her by the door. Both girls were staring straight ahead and did not acknowledge Paulette's wave, which she thought was peculiar. The driver was a white male in his late 20s. The vehicle was similar to a 1965 Cadillac or Plymouth. Paulette was not sure about the license plate. In 1970, West Virginia University still enforced a curfew for women, so when Karen and Merritt did not return to their dorms, the Dean of Women reported it to the West Virginia State Police, and a statewide alert was issued. The FBI was also alerted, but they could not join the investigation, though they did keep a close eye on the case. Law enforcement in 13 states was alerted. The day after the girls went missing, there was a report of a possible sighting in Ripley, West Virginia, about 150 miles from Morgantown. Someone had seen 2 women entering a tractor-trailer at a truck stop. The truck driver was located, and he said he had given 2 girls a ride from Ripley to Charleston, and that they said they were headed to Ashland, Kentucky. This completely refocused the investigation, even though the families of the girls were adamant that they would not take off traveling like that. The question was, were the girls abducted, or simply traveling on their own volition? For the first 2 weeks of the investigation, police were not convinced there was any foul play involved. A reward was put together from donations from West Virginia University students, a church, and the Malarick family. The students at the university petitioned the governor asking him to request full FBI participation. Merritt Malarick's family asked dentists in the area to be aware that Merritt was in the middle of getting some dental work done on her upper right molar and would need to see a dentist to finish the work. They hoped that if she was still out there, she could be found when she went to see a new dentist. 6 weeks went by with no sign of the women and no clues as to where they could be. Then, March 1st, 1970, a young boy found a purse along Route 119 south of Morgantown. It was identified as belonging to Merritt Malarick. Then, a little later, there were some anonymous letters sent claiming to have information on the whereabouts of the women. One letter was sent to Merritt's roommate at West Virginia University, and another was sent to the state police. One of the letters read, "Gentlemen, I have some information on the whereabouts of the bodies of the 2 missing West Virginia University Coeds, Merritt Malarick and Karen Farrell. Follow direction very carefully, to the nth degree, and you cannot fail to find them. Proceed 25 miles directly south from the southern line of Morgantown. This will bring you to a wooded forest land. Enter into the forest exactly 1 mile. There are the bodies. 25 plus 1 equals 26 miles total. Will reveal myself when the bodies are located. Sincerely." And the letter was signed with simply a triangle. They all had a Cumberland, Maryland postmark. Police looked into the information given in the letter, but nothing ever came of it. They focused a new search in the area of Route 119, where the purse was found. The search included 100 National Guardsmen from the 201st Artillery Unit. There were 130 searchers along Route 119. A half-mile from where Merritt's purse was found, an eyeglass case was found. Inside were a pair of large, horn-rimmed women's glasses that also belonged to Merritt. Also found was a suede purse belonging to Karen Farrell, a medicine bottle belonging to Merritt, plus a hairbrush and some cosmetics. April 14th to 15th, the search continued on its northwest route, and another medicine bottle was found along with a headscarf. National Guardsman Stephen Slavinsky was searching near Weirton Mine. He was drawn to an area near Owl Creek and followed a trail to a strange pile of stones, wood, and leaves. And Karen Farrell's foot was protruding from the debris. The area was immediately sealed off. State police investigators began processing the scene. Both women were face down in a shallow depression. Karen was on top of Merritt in a diagonal fashion. They were wearing the clothing they were last seen in. Karen was wearing a striped pair of brown culottes and a sweater, and Merritt had blue bell-bottoms and a faux fur coat. And both women were decapitated. Rape was initially discounted. The physical violence carried out on the women alluded to rage, possibly a drug-induced killing. After the bodies were found, the case went cold. The letters that had been sent to the roommate and police were found to be from a religious sect in Cumberland, Maryland, and the person who sent them was ruled out as a suspect. April 1971, a state trooper came out and said that Governor Arch Moore asked investigators to lie to the parents of Merritt Malarick about the progress in the case. He was subsequently fired, but sued and later retained his job. Things went nowhere until January 1977, when there was a break that came from New Jersey. Eugene Paul Clausen was incarcerated for sex crimes in Camden County, New Jersey, when he told a guard he wanted to make a confession. Clausen had allegedly been suffering from night terrors and wanted to clear his conscience. He told the guard that he had killed and decapitated 2 women in West Virginia. His official confession was taken by Camden County Captain Francisco Senator and West Virginia State Trooper Richard Hall. The police tried to keep the name of the suspect quiet while they investigated his claims, but the governor announced the name. The prosecutor was not happy with that. Anyway, I'm going to share with you the confession given by Clausen. This information comes from court transcripts. Also, I am going to be taking some liberties here and not give you some of the details, as they are disturbing, and I'm not into sensationalizing things. Also, this is the part you really shouldn't let kids listen to. Clausen begins his story of the events of January 18th, saying, "Well, I drove down there, Port Marion, Pennsylvania, from Philly to visit my mother, and I had a 61 black and white Buick. I left that at my mother's house, and I hitchhiked to Pittsburgh. I had a friend who lives there. He's an ex-convict, and he lives on Center Avenue, but I couldn't find his house because I never been there before. I wasn't familiar with Pittsburgh. I think it was a 1970 Chevy, and it was cream-colored, I think. It was either in a shopping center or a hotel drive or parking lot. I drove, back through Point Marion, and while, I kept the car for a few days before I went to Morgantown with it. I was cruising around looking for somebody to pick up because I can't have normal sex with nobody. I have to have abnormal sex. I have to force people to give me what I want, or I don't have any pleasure. I was just riding around looking for somebody to pick up. I seen a couple girls on the corner hitchhiking. I don't know what the street was. It was Willie Avenue or something. Clausen stopped and offered the women a ride, and both entered in the front seat and closed the car door. He said, "After I got pulled away from the curb, I told them, I glanced and saw the 2 people after I got a block up the street. I put a gun on them, the women, and made them lay down on the floor of the car. I told them if they didn't get down to the floor, I'd blow their heads off. So they got down on the floor. I drove with them. I got off that street, but I don't know what street I got on. I don't remember because I just know that I drove for a good ways. It must have been over 20 miles. It seemed like it anyway. After I drove on this other road for so long, a good ways, then I got off on the side road. That's where it was some woods, remote. It was remote because I couldn't see the main road where it turned off from where I was at. I parked with them." At this point in the confession, Captain Senator asked, "Let me get this straight. You say you picked them up and drove down a road. Was this a concrete road you drove down?" "Yes, the road I drove on was a main road of some kind, but I don't know where it went or nothing. I don't know how to read rulers, and I don't know how to read like a compass. I can't read no compass, and I don't know whether I'm going north or south. I never learned to read a compass or ruler. The only road I know near Morgantown or West Virginia is High Street. I know High Street in Morgantown and 119. That, 119, goes right on through Uniontown. Well, it don't go right through Uniontown. You have to When you get to Uniontown, you go down Route 40, and then you go to the left through Connellsville, Pennsylvania. But that's the only highway I really know in West Virginia, period. It's 119. That's the only one I'm familiar with. I parked in the woods, and I made the one girl get up, and I put handcuffs on her, and I hooked the handcuffs under the seat of the car because it was like little spring or hook, part of the seat under where you could hook it. Then I made one girl crawl over top of the seat and into the back. I handcuffed the one because I didn't want her to run off. I didn't want her, the woman in the front seat, to run. The other one, I had a gun on. She'd run because I had a gun. I made her get undressed. I had abnormal sex with her. At this point, Captain Senator asked if both Clausen and the woman in the back seat were completely undressed, and he replied, "We was both naked. The clothes were on the back seat floor of the car. The woman in the front seat, she was dressed. I didn't make her take her clothes off. I didn't want to handle both of them at the same time. The other one, after I got done having sex with her, I was still hot because whenever I force somebody, I just stay hard. I didn't get enough right away." Captain Senator interrupted Clausen, saying, "Let me ask you, did these girls say anything to you? Did they plead?" "They pleaded with me. They just made me more excited. They asked why I was doing that to them, and I don't know, different stuff like that. But I just told them to shut their mouths, and I talked very nasty to them. I think I slapped one of them before she disobeyed me, but I think I slapped her for talking. I didn't want her to talk. After I got done with the first girl, I made her get in the front with me because I didn't want her jumping out of the car, getting out of some kind of way out of the car. So I unfastened the other girl. I made the one that was naked get back down on the floor, and I fastened the other one and just took the handcuffs off her and told her to get naked, get her clothes off. The clothes she took off were on the floor in the front seat. Then I made both of them get in the back seat, but I kept the handcuffs on the one in the front. I handcuffed her hands in front of her. I made her get in the back seat, both of them. Then I made them have an unnatural sex act with themselves." I'm skipping some details here because you don't really want to read them. I told her if she screamed I would kill her. She screamed, she hollered, and then I got done doing what I was doing to her. I slapped her in her face a few times pretty hard because she disobeyed me. Then I made the other girl do the same thing to her. After the rapes, I told them to get dressed, but I may have took the panties and bras. I don't know because the panties and bra turned me on. Then I got them outside the car, shot one of them in the head. Captain Senator then said, "Let me ask you one question. You didn't shoot them right alongside the car?" When Clausen answered no, Senator asked, "You're saying no, you walked them back into the woods, and you shot one of them, you say?" "I shot her in the head. When she fell, she pulled the other one down or knocked her off balance. And when I shot her, all I did was graze her because it didn't kill her. She was laying on the ground, moaning and whimpering and begging, and it just excited me, and I ran back in the car and got the machete. It was underneath the seat, and I went back and I chopped her head off. The one, she was wounded, and I chopped the other one. I cut her head off too. The blood excited me. I dragged their bodies back to some dead branches or logs or something, and I covered them up." Captain Senator asked, "Let me get this straight. You say now you dragged their bodies?" "I didn't carry them. I did drag them. I thought I told you before." Captain Senator asked, "You dragged them further back into the woods then?" "Yes, there was like a clearing there, and it was on the other side of the clearing where these old logs or whatever they were, branches or something was." Finally, Captain Senator asked, "Did you drag them both at one time?" "No, one at a time." Then Senator asked, "What did you do?" "I ran back in the car and I got the machete out from under the seat. It was underneath the seat and I went back and I chopped her head off." Then he clarified, "The one, she was wounded and I chopped the other one. I cut her head off too." I reached climax because the blood excited me. I dragged their bodies back to some dead branches or logs or something, and I covered them up. I put them on their backs and covered them up with logs. Before I covered them up, I took some stuff off them. I don't know if it was a class ring or what it was. It was something like that and some kind of necklace. I'm not sure, but I think I took a watch, too. But I don't know what kind. I don't remember what it was or nothing. Captain Senator said, "So you took a ring, a watch, and a necklace, right?" "I took a necklace of some kind. I'm not certain. I had a necklace. I know I had a necklace. I don't know 3 or 4 days after that, but I don't remember where I got it at. I don't know where I got the necklace. I don't recall buying it from nobody." Then Captain Senator asked, "What did the necklace look like? Did it have anything hanging on it?" "I don't remember. I just know I had one. I think it had something on there. I think it was like a chain with something on it. I don't know. I'm not sure." Captain Senator asked, "Now were these articles taken off one girl or were some taken off each? Do you know?" "I don't know. I just know after I did it and I had the climax, I don't know what happened. I must have come into my other body because I got scared and all. I wanted to do was get away. And I don't know what I did. I don't know who I took them off of. I don't remember." At this point in the confession, Clausen's narrative becomes less detailed. Now, you mentioned earlier that you laid them on their backs. Do you mean that you laid them literally on their backs? "I just dragged them. I dragged them by their feet, but when I got back there, I put their head up. This was from me, not their heads, but their stumps, the top part of their body, away from me. Which would put them... Now your car is behind you. That would mean their feet are facing the road. That's the way I put them." "Did you put them close together?" "I don't think I laid them right side by side, maybe a little distance, but not far apart. I just wanted to get out of there." And Senator asked what he used to cover the bodies, and Clausen said, "Logs, dead branches or something. I think it was logs. It looked like somebody had been cutting something in back there, trees or something." "Jean, now what did you do after you covered them with the logs?" "I went back to my car." "And did you take anything back to the car with you?" "I took the heads. Up where the car was at, I found a rag, a large rag, dirty rag, and I put their heads in it." "Was the rag on the ground, or did you get it out of the car?" "No, it was on the ground." "There was a rag on the ground?" "There was just one rag on the ground, a large rag, and I picked that." "And you picked their heads up?" "I put their heads in the back seat, and I drove." "Excuse me, Jean, did you take anything else?" "Pocketbooks. I threw one out. I took one. I don't remember seeing 2 pocketbooks. I know I took some papers out of one, but I think it had a Jersey address on it, some kind of identification paper, and that's what I put under the steps of my mother's." "Did you take the pocketbook in the car with you?" "I didn't take it. It was in there." "It was left in the car?" "Yes, it was in the car, and after I got a good ways down the road someplace, I stopped to take a leak, and I threw it out. Just threw it out along the road." "You pulled over to the side of the road to take a leak? Did you walk to the side of the passenger's car to take a leak?" "No, I threw the pocketbook over." "You stopped your car and got out of it. Did you take a leak right on the driver's side on the street?" "Yes." "Now what did you do?" "I drove back to Morgantown. I got on 119 and I'm down on 199 to Sunnyside. I got on 119. I drove up 119 like towards Pittsburgh to a place called Sunnyside Inn or Welcome Inn, and there's a road that turns right there. It's a back road. I went down this back road to another road about maybe 3 or 4 miles down. It's a dirt road like. And I drove down there until I got to Con Hill Con Hill Schoolhouse, the road that goes... When you get to the top of this hill on Storktown Road, there is a little dirt road that turns left past my mother's house. But if you're coming down the back road, it's a right. And I pulled in there. It's a dead end. There's an old schoolhouse called Con Hill Schoolhouse. It's all rotted. I parked in there. I'm skipping a lot of stuff. Basically, there's information on things he did with the women's heads that I'm gonna leave to your own imagination, and your own imagination is probably not as gross as what's here. And he says, I got dressed, I wrapped the heads back up, and I walked through the woods. It's like a little glade, but it's not no mile. It ain't even a half mile to the top where this little glade where that flat is. It's not quite a walk, it's not very far. But anyway, I got up to these flat holes, 2 or 3 holes up there in the ground, because they've been there since I was a kid, and I just throw the heads and the rag down and all in one of these holes with the gun. You threw the heads in first, then the gun? No, I threw the gun in first, then the heads. And the rag all went down in? Yes. Then I got on Storktown Road, and I went down a little towards Point Marion. But I didn't take the car to my mother's house. I parked it right up on the curb by my house. We have an orchard, a cherry orchard, and I walked down. My brother's car wasn't there, so I know he wasn't home. I took the machete and I washed it off, cleaned it, and I took it back into his house. I went back into my mother's house. She was sleeping. She always left the door open for my brother or me if I was there. She never locked it, so I didn't have no trouble getting in. There was nobody up, and my brother wasn't home. I took it and I put the machete back in his room where I got it. Will you describe the machete for me? It's about like this. You're indicating with your hands approximately 2 feet long? I don't know, I can't tell you. What kind of handle did it have? It had a black handle, this long with a rawhide string in the hole. It had a string in the end of the handle. You could put your hand through the string and hold onto the handle. Do you know what the handle was made of? I don't know if it was hard plastic or what, like pistol grips. And around the handle it had a rawhide lacing to put around your wrist? Yes. Now what did you do, Jean? I took the car. This was here about, it might have been 3 or something in the morning. Drove to Pittsburgh with the car and parked it. So, that's the confession, or most of the confession. And there actually were some questions about Clausen's confession. West Virginia State Police checked Clausen's time cards and found that Clausen was in Philadelphia and clocked out at 2:11 p.m. the day of the murder, and was back in Philadelphia, again according to his time card, the day after. On the period of the time he spent in Point Marion, Captain Senator asked, "You said you stayed a couple of weeks. Is it possible you stayed a couple of days?" And Clausen responded, "It's possible, I don't remember." In addition to problems with the timeline, police were never able to verify a stolen car from Pittsburgh, let alone a car that would have had bloodstains all over the back seat. The fact that the police were never able to locate the stolen car from Pittsburgh, and that Clausen was unable to verify exactly where he picked up the women on University Avenue, the story of how Clausen might have committed this crime begins on very shaky ground. When the women's bodies were discovered on April 16, 1970, they were laying in a makeshift grave covered with stones, logs, branches, and leaves. The excavation of the body was supervised by Trooper Ronald Mozingo, who was assigned oversight of the West Virginia University Coed investigation. During the trial, Mozingo was asked, "Did you discern any visible signs of blood on any of the debris, rocks, or items near or around the gravesite?" He responded, "No, I did not." They were fully dressed, and both women had been decapitated. The bodies were removed to West Virginia University Hospital, where an autopsy was performed. As the bodies were undressed for examination, their clothing was not only intact, they each were wearing a full set of clothes. Merritt Malarick was also wearing pantyhose with a pack of cigarettes tucked into the waistband of the hose, with 1 cigarette remaining. There was no blood or bloodstains on the women's clothing. During testimony at the second trial, Trooper Preston Gooden described the women's clothing, saying, "The thing that impressed me as I removed them over was the condition of their clothing. the gloves still intact on their arms, on their hands. The coat on the one was missing. The other one had her coat on, with the buckle buckled, but as I recall, it was unbuttoned. Very neat. The clothing was very neat, and that's the main thing I remember. These findings contradict Clausen's confession, where the women would have hurriedly dressed after the trauma of a violent sexual assault at gunpoint. It seems unlikely that Merritt would have stopped to put on pantyhose, let alone tuck her cigarettes back in the waistband of her trousers. Contrary to Clausen's confession, it seems more likely that the decapitations occurred post-mortem, and the lack of blood at the scene was a result of coagulation, or that the murderer had ritualistic habits where he cleaned and redressed the bodies after decapitation. Finally, both women were found wearing their undergarments, which means these items could not have been taken as trophies, as Clausen outlined in his statement. A critical examination of the crime scene evidence seemed to suggest that the murders were more likely the work of a serial and well-organized perpetrator, not simply a man who decided to drive to West Virginia on the spur of the moment to pick up a victim, or in this case two, as the police and prosecution argued. I also want to point out that Clausen was a convicted pedophile. His preferred victims were 13 or younger. He also had Klinefelter syndrome, which means he had 2 or more X chromosomes. This results in impotency and weak upper body strength, so it's questionable that he could perform the sex acts he described or even manage to wrangle around 2 women. The only thing tying Clausen to the crime is his confession, that he recanted. In fact, he said, "I made the confession because I had been sitting in the jail for 2 years, and it was December 75. I read an article in 2 different magazines concerning the Coed murders, and I felt that if I could make the officials in West Virginia believe I was guilty, and I could get indicted for it and brought down here, Jersey, due to the fact that the charges down here are bigger than the ones I had in Jersey, Jersey would drop the charges against me, and then when I got down here, I felt I could prove my innocence, and then I would have no more time. That's why I did it." Despite the fact that he recanted, the county prosecutor's office moved forward and charged Clausen with 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was tried and convicted in the fall of 1976. Clausen's attorney successfully appealed the case to the West Virginia Supreme Court. His lawyers argued the case on the basis of that his confession was taken before he was fully informed of his Miranda rights, and the prosecution presented autopsy photos of the victims during the trial, and these grisly photos had prejudiced the jury. His conviction was overturned and he was granted a new trial in 1981. Clausen was convicted a second time in 1981 and sentenced to life in prison. Clausen died in the Mount Olive Correctional Complex in 2014. So what happened to Merritt Mallory and Karen Farrell? There are 2 other people thrown out there as potential suspects. One is the vampire rapist, John Brennan Crutchley. Crutchley was an American convicted kidnapper, rapist, and possible serial killer who was suspected of murdering up to 30 women, but was never tried for nor convicted of murder. He was called the vampire rapist because he drained the blood of one of his confirmed victims, almost to the point of death, while he repeatedly raped her. He had many connections to West Virginia, most notably his sister Carolyn Crutchley, who lived in Towers 3 as a student at West Virginia University, just down University Avenue from Westchester Hall, where Merritt and Karen lived while students. Though he had ties to West Virginia, I really don't think he was involved in this. Decapitation was not his thing. Another possible suspect is William Bernard Hacker Sr. Hacker was convicted in 1971 of murdering a man, decapitating him, and burying him in the woods under debris, much like Karen and Merritt. He also worked at the Weirton Mines, which was the area where Karen and Merritt were found. But young women weren't his type. He tended towards older women, and the only thing suggesting him as a suspect is the way he got rid of the body of the man he killed. He was actually a potential suspect in 1971, but was ruled out. Unfortunately, both of these suspects are dead, and we'll never really know the truth. Personally, I tend to think that Clausen made up his story. There were too many things that just didn't line up when the police looked at it further. But I think they just wanted to pin it on somebody because it was such a horrendous crime. That's going to do it for this episode of Lurk. Remember, you can find us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, or at lurkpodcast.com, where we have episodes, along with links to our social media. If you like what you hear, consider giving us a 5-star review, and make sure you tell your friends. And until next time, keep lurking.